The first panel, the first section, I invite the speakers, our guest, please, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Meleshkanu, former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Yes, please, Mr. Dungaciu. Please. Okay, this is the format of our first station. Thank you very much for our guest. Distinguished members of the parliaments, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the first session of our conference has as a theme the Eastern Partnership. The Eastern neighborhood of the EU, it's very important for us and for the stability, peace, and cooperation in this part of the world, to safeguard security of the border of European Union and to encourage the enlargement of the European Union. In the same time, we celebrate this day, 10 years that it was launched, this initiative. And we need not only to reiterate the collective commitment of the European Union for the unity, sustainability, and the territorial integrity assumed for the countries that are part of the Eastern Partnership, but also a new and more ambitious perspectives. We hope that this new debate, our debate will be very important for the next summit in Brussels of the Council of the European Union, organized of this occasion of 10 years of the existence of the European Partnership. And the results of this summit with the approach that we proposal will be a very good statement for the next European Parliament and the next Commission to continue and to encourage and to develop this partnership. I want to introduce Professor Dungaciu. Professor Dungaciu, Dan Dungaciu. It's a diplomat, an expert in the international relations, is the chairman of the International Relations Institute of the Romanian Academy, one of the most prestigious institutes in Romania, chairman of the Black Sea University Foundation, and it is a well-known specialist with a very good expertise in this region, the international problem of the region, and I ask him to moderate this meeting. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. And first, let me say that how pleased and honored I am to chair such a very distinguished panel. And thank you very much, the organizer, for inviting me and having me here. And let me start by saying that it's not an academic discussion, an academic debate. Also, the Eastern Partnership is a very juicy topic for academics, but it's a political discussion, a political debate, and as far as the organizers are concerned, a very important one. And then let me underline the main reason, three reasons for such a, for the opportunity we have and you have to approach this issue. And the main reason is that Eastern Partnership, it's a test. It's a test for European foreign policy. I would say the most important test, or one of the most important tests for the European Union, because it's the main problem of European Union as far as the foreign policy is concerned, is that European Union is not a state, and the consequence is European Union does not have a realpolitik, as other normal nation states have. Not having a realpolitik, it means that it's a little bit, it's a normative actor. Having a realpolitik is based on shared values or historical experiences. foreign policy, European Union foreign policy is based on his structure. So it's normative and sometimes ideological. So this is the reason that is a test. If you are not able to do it or not able to be effective in areas like Eastern Partnership or in our neighborhood, what can we hope? Because this region is very close to Europe in terms of civilization, in terms of history, in terms of tradition. So in this respect, we think that Eastern Partnership or this region and the Western Balkans are the real test for European Union foreign policy. The second argument, according to the organizer, is that Eastern Partnership, of course, the countries which are part of the Eastern Partnership are bordering EU and NATO. And of course, Romania. So for Romania, it's very important because Romania has 1,400 kilometers border with Ukraine and Republic of Moldova. In fact, it's the former USSR border. So for Romania, it's very important what is going on the other side of the fence, so to speak. It's important because predictability or stability is not the proper term to use when you characterize these countries. Countries like Ukraine or Republic of Moldova. And of course it's important. Of course it's important to see what is going on there. It's important how much Russia do we have in this region. It's important to try to tackle this frozen conflict or protected conflicts. And not necessarily the conflicts as such, but maybe the way in which these conflicts could be defrozen. And it's a challenge. It's a very important challenge for Romania. Plus, you have Republic of Moldova. Republic of Moldova is like it or not. I mean, it's Romanian citizens de facto or de jure, Romanian-speaking people interested in Romania and Romania interested in Republic of Moldova. So for these reasons, that proximity, it's essential because Romania, at least for one generation, maybe will remain the east of the west. It's better to be the east of the west than to be the west of the east, but it's still challenging. And the third reason is that if you look beyond the Eastern Partnership, what you see is Russia. Now, somebody could argue that if you look through the Eastern Partnership, you can see Russia as well, but it's not the point. The point is that you see Russia and you have to have an answer to this challenge. Because the way in which we deal with Eastern Partnership or the status, the political status or the strategic status of the region will depend, of course, the way, the relationship between Brussels and Moscow or Union and Russia, and vice versa. These relationships are depending on the way in which we perceive countries which are part of Eastern Partnership, and this policy as such. So for all these reasons, I think it's again a very important and very good opportunity to try to tackle this topic. And before turning to our very distinguished panelists, let me ask the main question for discussions, again according to the organizer of this meeting. The first question is, what is the future of the Eastern Partnership given the political and social changes that are undergoing in the Eastern Partnership countries? The second question, is the project of the European Union attractive enough for the Eastern Partnership countries and their citizens? The third question, is there a need for a specific and well-defined budget to revive the Eastern Partnership? The fourth question, do the EU member states have enough political will to grant to the Eastern Partnership countries the opportunity to obtain the full member status in the near future? Now, having said that, I'm now turning to the members of this panel, very important and very significant panelists. The first speaker, Mr. Teodor Meleșcanu, it's a Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for being with us. The second speaker is Thomas Barry Harting. It's Managing Director for Europe and Central Asia, European External Action Service. Thank you very much for being with us. And the last speaker is Titus Corlățeanu, Senator and former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for being with us here. And a last technical remark, each speaker has 8 minutes, the red line is 10 minutes, and then we'll have 40 minutes for debates, questions, and answer. Now, our first speakers, it's Mr. Teodor Meleșcanu. His Excellency, you have the floor, and we are eager to listen to it. It's up to you. You can use this microphone, you can get to the...
Okay, is it working? No. Good morning, everybody, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. As a parliamentarian myself and the former chairman of the Foreign Security Affairs and also the chairman of the Defense Committee of the Senate, I am deeply honored to be in front of you and to say a few words about one of the most important issues and priorities for Romania during our presidency of the European Union Council. Now, apart the presentation of the priorities of Romania, which you already know them very well, I would like to stress the fact that from our point of view, one of the top priorities is the Eastern Partnership, especially because this year we will celebrate 10 years from the creation of the Eastern Partnership, and secondly, because we can have a chance to look at what has happened, to have a kind of stock taking on it and looking into the future as well. Now, this opportunity is to be used also in preparing, in a way, what will happen after 2020 with the European Union partnership policy. Now, from a Romanian perspective, it is without doubt that the cooperation between the European Union and countries like our eastern neighbors, I'm speaking about the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. From our point of view, if we want to sum up, our conclusion is that we have brought them closer to the European community of values, principles and norms, in accordance, of course, with their own ambitions and objectives. It also helped them to integrate their economies with one of the biggest markets in the world, the market of the European Union, and strengthening their institutions, increasing connectivity, enhancing mobility, and creating a lot of people-to-people contacts during our Eastern Partnership. It is provided, from our point of view, a win-win situation, despite of times when accidental or not, there are some setbacks and criticism and reluctance on this policy. Now, these 10 years brought about constant development of our relationship, most prominently through the implementation of the association agreements, deep and comprehensive trade agreements, and the visa-free regime, which were signed 5 years ago with the Republic of Moldova, with Ukraine and Georgia. All these steps contributed seriously to committing these countries to a wide range of reforms, increasing also their trade with the European Union and promoting socio-economic relations with the European Union. An innovative and comprehensive and enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement was concluded also with Armenia, and this one is seen in Yerevan as, I quote, a reform-generating tool of tremendous importance for the success of our reforms, as the Armenian Prime Minister declared in Brussels 2 days ago. There are currently also negotiations underway on a new framework agreement for further deepening our cooperation with Azerbaijan, and the progress which is taking place gives hopes for a successful conclusion rather soon. Then the negotiations of the European Union and Belarus partnership priorities are a very clear proof of an increased and constructive engagement with Belarus on behalf of the European Union. Now, within the multilateral inclusive framework of the Eastern Partnership, we have jointly agreed at the highest level on the agenda of concrete deliverables for the year 2020, and we have all demonstrated a serious commitment to successful implementation of these deliverables. Now, as an EU Council presidency, Romania is committed to strengthen projects and its international profile. We have stated our constant support for a stronger, more united European Union in all its dimensions, political, economic, and social, according to our motto of presidency, cohesion, a common European value. A stronger Europe can only succeed in connection with a solid and comprehensive external action aimed at strengthening ties with our partners, first of all, with our immediate neighbors. As EU Council presidency, Romania is keenly engaged in promoting the global role of the European Union, including a robust European action in our eastern neighborhood. Marking the 10th anniversary of the Eastern Partnership during our mandate at the helm of the European Union Council, it's a moment, as I said, for taking stock of what has happened and also a possibility to look into the future and the development of this policy after the year 2020. With your permission, I will refer to a few concrete activities of Romania from this point of view. Last week, the third Eastern Partnership Ministerial Meeting on the digital economy took place in Bucharest, bringing together EU telecom ministers and their counterpart from the 6 partner countries. This meeting focused on the benefits of the digital single market to the partners, an issue like harmonization of the broadband infrastructure, and also working on leveling international mobile roaming among the Eastern Partnership partners, as well as setting the basis for future development of roaming harmonization between the European Union and the Eastern Partnership countries. This is a first-hand example of delivering on our promises and producing practical results positively for the lives of the citizens. At the beginning of the month of April, the European Union and the Eastern Partnership members, especially I'm speaking about the Ministers of Energy, will gather in Bucharest to discuss energy infrastructure, connectivity projects, and issues of energy efficiency. It will be a unique opportunity to take stock of the main achievements in increasing this energy interconnectivity. But high on the list when we are talking about this meeting is the project of the natural gas interconnector between Iași, Ungheni, Chișinău with the Republic of Moldova. This project, meant to support enhancing Moldova's security energy, is also a high priority for our bilateral relations between Romania and Moldova. In June, we'll have another Eastern Partnership Ministerial meeting for transport. I'm sorry, it's not in Bucharest. It will take place in Luxembourg under the Romanian presidency to discuss cooperation in transport and logistics with focus on transport connections between European Union and our close neighbors. Also, in June, we plan to organize in Bucharest the Eastern Partnership Business Forum, marking also the 5 years since the signing of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreements with the 3 Eastern partners I was referred to. By bringing together businessmen from the European Union member states and the partner states, the event will be, from our point of view, an excellent occasion to consider the opportunities to open in the implementation of the specific bilateral agreements for each partner of the European Union. And last but not least, we are cooperating with our colleagues from Lithuania for the organization in Vilnius in June of a youth forum that will involve officials and youth representatives in an effort to analyze problems and identify best ways to support the youth from the partner countries. Apart from working on concrete areas, the Romanian Council presidency is dedicated to marking the 10 years of the application of this policy. As I said, it will be a meeting at the ministerial level in Brussels, and our ambition is to try to really give a perspective for the Eastern Partnership after the year 2020. The definition of particular objectives and aspirations related to the Eastern Partnership can be very important from all points of view. Our joint efforts for advancing the Eastern Partnership objectives, while also offering tailor-made approaches, does pay off to all of our partners. A lot has still to be done to advance the economic, social, and institutional reforms in the partner countries. However, we cannot disregard the consistent achievements which took place so far. The degree of rapprochement and adaptation of our partners to the European Union is obvious, and so are the benefits of this process for the European Union and for the partners. We see our task in keeping the process of developing and building on the possibility for further European integration of our partners if and when they are meeting the conditions for this process. The Eastern Partnership is not only a priority of the Romanian presidency of the Council, it is a priority of the European Union. I am pleased that Interparliamentary Conference dedicates in this first session, it's dedicating everything to the Eastern Partnership, and I'm looking forward for hearing your questions and discussions with the outcome of these policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meleșcanu, for your reasonable, optimistic approach and then your positive messages. And the next speaker is Mr. Thomas Meyer-Harting, a perspective from European External Action Service. Mr. Harting is Managing Director for Europe and Central Asia. Sir, you have the floor.
I'm afraid it will be a different
view. Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be here and speak at this important event. And let me first of all express my gratitude for the Romanian Parliament organizing this discussion in particular, in a certain sense, is one of the first anniversary activities on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the Eastern Partnership. The first question that we have been asked is whether is a question basically about the European aspirations of our Eastern partners. And I think it is fair to say that support for Europe and for the European idea, especially amongst our associated partners, the populations there, is probably stronger and more united than some of the member states of the European Union. And it is also worth remembering at a date when we're quite close to the 5th anniversary of what happened on the Maidan, that in 2014 people died for Europe in Ukraine, which is also in many ways a unique historical experience. Obviously, the question basically is what the Eastern Partnership has achieved in these 10 last years, and it is clear that, in my opinion in any case, that it has contributed greatly to strengthening the resilience of this region. I will speak about the key principles that guide us there, but I do think that this is an achievement, and we've also achieved a lot in areas that have perhaps not been noted in that detail by many who discuss this. When it comes to our key areas, for instance, strengthening the economic sectors, one of the most recent focuses is precisely on supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, providing them with loans in local currency. And alone in the last few years, these activities have helped 70,000 enterprises, channeling more than 2 billion euro and creating 28,000 new jobs. In the field of connectivity, we have placed a particular emphasis on energy security and energy efficiency. According to our statistics, 100,000 families were able to cut their energy bills and improve their living standards thanks to the work of the Eastern Partnership. Most importantly, because I have always considered this to be the key area and perhaps the strongest field of Eastern Partnership cooperation, people-to-people contacts, working with civil society. Erasmus Plus has provided study opportunities for 30,000 students from the Eastern Partnership countries in the last 10 years, and this is undoubtedly a process where we still need to do more and need to continue. One of the areas, perhaps the area of key priority for the Eastern Partnership, especially if you look also at resilience, is strengthening governance, is working on judicial reforms, working on institutions, fighting against corruption, making the state more efficient and more just. And while some progress has been received and a lot of progress has been achieved in this field, I think we have to say that amongst the famous 20 deliverables for 2020, this is the area where the most work still needs to be done in the Eastern Partnership. We still need to do much more in the field of governance, on the rule of law and reform of the judiciary. In some places, regrettably, we see shrinking space for civil society, freedom of the media, and this is regularly also a subject of discussion of civil society representatives in the Eastern Partnership context. I think Vice President Pascu raised the issue at the beginning of more for more. And this is certainly one of the key principles of the Eastern Partnership. But I think that you have to be aware that amongst the member states of the European Union, there's now also a discussion on less for less. If some of the most motivated partners lag behind, if these principles they have committed to are not being fulfilled, if we see these negative developments with regard to the rule of law and governance, then this discussion will be unavoidable. And in fact, foreign ministers will have a challenging discussion ahead of them in a few days' time on the developments in the Republic of Moldova, which at one point was undoubtedly the front runner in the Eastern Partnership, and I don't think it can be qualified as such. Has not been possible to qualify it as such in recent years. It has also been said, and it is often said, that the Eastern Partnership, and we have underlined this because others have presented it differently, is not a place which forces partners to make binary choices. We have never said that we demand exclusivity in our relationship with Eastern partners. Eastern partners, even those that have the closest and most ambitious relationship vis-à-vis the European Union, can have good relations with us, and at the same time they can also have constructive relations with others if these others allow for it, which, as you know, has not been the case. In the past, we spent a whole year, fruitless year, in trilateral commercial negotiations between Ukraine, Russia, and the European Union, trying to find a method under which these the free trade agreement, the comprehensive and deep free trade agreement that we have with Ukraine can be made compatible with the free trade obligations of Ukraine in the framework, free trade opportunities of Ukraine in the framework of the Commonwealth of Independent States, but we were not able to achieve it, and I believe this was not because of us, because we did not want to achieve it. Of course, speaking about binary choices, I once had an interesting conversation with one of the ambassadors of the Eastern Partner countries in Brussels, who said to me, "This is very fine, but we would like to make a binary choice." But the truth of the matter is, and I think you know this, that within the Council amongst member states, of the European Union. There is no consensus about that kind of exclusive perspective for the European Union. I think it is clear that there is no consensus amongst member states at this point in time for a membership perspective of Eastern Partnership countries. I think at this stage we remain at the language that we acknowledge the European aspirations of these countries and welcome their European choice. But I think it is unlikely that the Council will be willing to go beyond this line even in the years to come. So this brings us back to the basic question, what can we do with Eastern partners as a whole, and in particular also with Eastern partners that are amongst the more ambitious? And this, I think, lets us focus again on the two core principles of the Eastern Partnership, which are inclusivity and differentiation. And let me say, it is probably easier for all of us to agree on the exact content of inclusivity than to agree on the exact content of differentiation. I think it is in the interest of everyone that we have a partnership of 6, 3 partners who are associated partners, 3 whose ambitions are more tailor-made, and in a certain sense, in recent years, we have achieved the most remarkable progress precisely in this second group. And Foreign Minister Melescano has already referred to the agreement we were able to conclude with Armenia, a successful agreement that respected Armenia's obligations within the Eurasian Economic Union, but still provides now the guideline for Armenia's reform process, and this was underlined once again by Prime Minister Pashinyan when he came to Brussels 2 days ago. So this is, and I think that we are negotiating, as you know, with Azerbaijan. We hope that we will soon be able to conclude an agreement with them as well. And with all the challenges we've been facing in our relationship with Belarus, obviously, in my opinion, having a contractual relationship with that country would also be in the logic of the relations of the Eastern Partnership. But now what do we do about differentiation? That is to say, what do we do about those that want to go further? First of all, I think it has to be said that the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement still leave quite a lot of space for implementation. A lot still needs to be done in some areas of the association agreement. This is something we're constantly discussing, in particular also with Ukraine and Georgia, on further work that can be done in this field. And the work here is not completed. Basically, I think it's fair to say that these countries are seeking a stronger and a more intense integration into the internal market, work with the internal market, than is the declared goal, for instance, of the United Kingdom right now with regard to its future relationship with the European Union. There are also areas where we can perhaps go beyond what has been done so far in the framework of the association agreement. Digital sector is a sector that Ukraine has shown a particular interest in, working on the energy sector, trying to approximate the energy policies of these countries, integrate them into the energy market of the European Union is something else we're working on, trying to promote even closer cooperation in the customs field is another sector. And roaming, by the way, a subject that is particularly important and that also for the population as such is a field where we can try to do substantially more. One aspect that is also worth noting is that it is necessary to look at possibilities to work multilaterally also with the 3 partners within the Eastern Partnership that have deep and comprehensive free trade agreements, because they have specific concerns and specific interests that the others do not automatically have. And the Eastern Partnership Summit Declaration in 2017 stipulated inter alia that while preserving the inclusivity of the Eastern Partnership, it is timely to engage associated partners in joint discussions on the progress, opportunities and challenges concerning the association-related reforms as requested by these partners, and with the aim of facilitating full implementation of the association agreements. This is something we can still work on, and I do have to say the issue of how we define differentiation, the potential that we give to the most ambitious partners to develop in the field of differentiation, that I think will be the key subject of discussion in the years to come on the future development of the Eastern Partnership. But let me also say in conclusion, for us, and this is a subject that also needs to be recalled in view of some of the developments even in the neighborhood of Romania, it is not sufficient for somebody to call himself pro-European, and we have always found the distinction in some places between pro-European and pro-Russian forces as simplistic. What counts for us, what counts for the institutions of the European Union is not how people define themselves, how political parties define themselves in our Eastern Partnership countries. The essential point is what they do to promote our values, to promote these values on which European integration is based and on which the Eastern Partnership is based as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harting, for your very rich and comprehensive presentation and very nuanced and I would say very challenging in a good way. And now we are turning to our third panelist is Mr. Titus Corățean, is former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Corățean, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like also myself to welcome colleagues coming from the European Parliament, from national parliaments, which are also members of different other international parliamentary assemblies, inter alia, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, of NATO, and OSCE. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be the country that is assuming for the first time in our history the presidency of the EU Council, and to have you here in Bucharest and to discuss on a topic which also in Bucharest it's considered as one of the most important challenges that we are facing currently. And I will try to explain myself. I structured my intervention in 3 parts. The point of the departure, very briefly, what was achieved, very briefly, and what should be the next step and steps. This will be a more political comment from my side, and because Romania still remains, and it's good like that, Francophone country, the second part of my intervention will be in French. The first one will say something like this. In 2019, during the Romanian presidency of the Council of the European Union, it was said, we are marking the anniversary of a milestone in our relation with the Eastern Partner countries, 10 years since the launching of the Eastern Partnership, already 10 years. It is a symbolic anniversary of a project related to the goal of building a common area of shared democracy, prosperity, stability, and increased cooperation in line with each individual country's aspirations, and I will underline this. In addition to the symbolic nature of the anniversary, we have to recall that security and stability in the Eastern partners, it's an equally important for the partners of and the European Union. It is thus our mutual interest to make sure that in the process of developing security and regional level, essential elements such as promoting of strong state institutions and rule of law principles are present. Strategic communication and efficiency in responding to hybrid threats are object of mutual EU-Eastern Partnership projects in consolidating regional security. In the complex geopolitical context that affects the regional security, it's important to highlight the founding principles of the Eastern Partnership. It's something that we know, but I would like once again to recall this. The Eastern Partnership initiative is not against any country. It is a mutually beneficial and constructive platform for countries in the region to build a closer relationship with the European Union if they so choose. The EU does not demand that any of its partners need to make a choice between the European Union and any other countries, but its actions are guided by the more for more principle. And I will make a little bit later a comment to what was mentioned previously by another panelist, a so-called principle less to less. In 10 years, we reached significant developments, the association agreements and the DCFTAs, visa-free regimes for 3 of the most engaged Eastern partners, an innovative agreement, CEPA, with Armenia, a dynamic negotiation process for the new agreement with Azerbaijan, and constructive critical engagement with Belarus. We have agreed joint priority objectives for 2020, and we have demonstrated commitment in implementing them in due time. On a political note, continued engagement towards all of our partners must remain our strategic objective, and 2019 should mark the beginning of a real and substantial reflection period on the future of Eastern Partnership, and the Romanian presidency will encourage the positive brainstorming which should lead to a new political agenda and to be adopted at the next summit. I will switch now in French. La question principale, à mon avis, comme je suis un membre du Parlement, sans avoir...
As I am a member of the parliament, without having any political commitments, I have freedom of expression. So the important question is what's going on in political terms? What are the stakes, the strategic challenges, the security challenges? Central Europe, Western Balkans, Eastern neighborhood, those are issues having to do with political opinions. This is at least my opinion. I've heard something as of late in terms of a new principle. When it comes to the achievements of the countries that have already signed the association agreements with the EU, I'm not really keen to implementing this more for more principle. I'm keen, or they are keen, to implementing more for one. I think that in this respect, we need to carry out a political discussion with the members of the national parliaments. If you're talking to colleagues coming from countries which had been part of the former Soviet Union and which are now full-fledged members in the EU and in NATO, you will spot some nuances, and everybody agrees about these nuances in Bucharest. There are nuances in the Central Europe because we used to be part of the same group prior to the communism fall. Each and every one of us had our share of suffering in a system that wasn't really kind to human rights, freedom of expression, and we need to put some nuances in understanding what's going on the other side of the Prut River, to understand what's going on in Ukraine or in Georgia, countries which had been part of the Soviet Union before. What happened in Central Europe is, what happened prior to the fall of communism is well known. And that is important for us because in Romania, progress, and I won't be shy about it, but our progress may be interpreted differently as compared to what may be a technical peer review of the European Commission or of the various DGs. For instance, The politics I made reference to, the prospect of the Western Balkans, those were political issues and an inclusive approach, including for my own country, and that's not bad. Romania did not recognize Kosovo out of reasons of internal public law, but this didn't prevent us to take part jointly with the other partners in an inclusive approach on the Balkans. And let me recall you that when we were presidents of the Southeastern cooperation process, the Romanian presidency negotiated with all the directly interested partners. We negotiated what happened in Serbia, and under this Romanian presidency, we reached agreement on Kosovo, and that was based on political will, which had been expressed. Now, the discussion about the Eastern Partnership is mainly political. During their presentations, during the previous speakers' presentations, there was mention about the Republic of Moldova. We know very well in Bucharest what's the internal dynamics and to what extent Russia implements its ideas. I was part of the international observers mission for the Moldovan elections, and we were told by the OSCE experts that this time there won't be any geopolitical issue. Nothing geopolitical will be at stake this time. But let's step back 2.5 years ago, when presidential elections happened in Moldova. There were professional transporters taking people from Transnistria to Moldova to vote in the presidential elections. This is how there was a distortion in the expression of the will of Moldovans. If we know which the reasons are, which the stakes are for countries that want to have military presence in other territories, this is how things are going on in Moldova or in Georgia. In Georgia, citizens were purely and simply victims. In December 2013, there was the ministerial OSCE conference. On that occasion, I saw people protesting for freedom and for their European aspirations, and that is something we need to observe. This is political. We need to observe and respect the will of the people. We need to respect the will of the Georgians, because Russian troops occupy part of the territory of this country. Romania provided an important, a significant contingent for the international presence in Georgia. And that's how I'm reaching the end of my presentation. 5 years ago, I had a debate, and 5 years have elapsed. Therefore, we can speak in free terms about it. So 5 years ago, during the interministerial conference of foreign ministers, we debated the same issue that we debate nowadays. Quite clearly, polarization appeared between people who say we don't need to provide people hopes if those hopes are not grounded, cooperation agreements, reforms, and so on. And the others who were claiming, they were mainly our colleagues from Romania and the Baltic Seas, they were saying we need to respect the will of the people and their European colleague in the Republic of Moldova. Yes, Moldovans are not perfect, but their situation in a former Soviet area is different. as compared to, for instance, what happened in Central Europe. If we understand, if we grasp these nuances which are important, then we understand that we need to have a different approach, but we need to comply with the European Treaty as well. So if a country has an European calling and wishes to politically associate and to economically associate to the European Union, if the country so wishes, then we need to be honest as well. We need to stress this European calling because there is a big difference between treating one partner by telling this partner, perform these reforms which are painful, without providing them with final goal, and then say, quite honestly, this is the goal, you may reach this goal in time. However, we need to be honest in the relation with our partners as well. Perhaps it's unusual to have such an address with such an approach in such a conference. However, in all these years, I've noticed that various political evolutions were registered in the various EU countries, and the political will has changed. Enlargement, the EU enlargement policy is an extraordinary policy of the EU in terms of competitivity results and so on. But things will be different if, as of tomorrow, at our border, the Republic of Moldova will have a government choosing another direction, another course. Let me be very candid about it. 10 years ago, at the Romanian-Moldovan border, there was still barbed wire fences. 10 years elapsed, and now the situation has radically changed, and the relations and the integration of the Moldovan area into the European space are now a reality. Of course, it's not an ideal world, but let's keep sensitive to nuances and to things which on the other side of the border may look dramatic. And let me tell you once again, and quite frankly, when I was talking to French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Greece colleagues, they were telling me, here are our priorities. We respect them because they are legitimate and because we need to be to show proof of solidarity, and that is what Romania is doing by participating in all Frontex activities or in all terrorism fighting activities. But the approach needs to be uniform and filled with solidarity in the EU, because the eastern border is also important as well. Let's not forget the budget allocated and the political will. Thank you very much.
For your presentation, and according to our schedule, we still have 30 minutes for questions and answers, comments. You see the list; it's quite comprehensive, so to speak. Apparently, our panel was challenging and raised so many questions. So, a technical issue: the red color means that on your micro means that you are online. The green color means that you are in waiting position. So, you have 2 minutes to make your comments and question. Please be as brief as possible. Remember that you are staying somehow between us and our lunch, so we have to be careful enough. So the first on our list is Mr. Andreas Schieder, Austria. You have the floor. Please.
Thank you. And thank you also the Romanian organizers for this very interesting panel. I want to raise some points. The one is we are globally focusing, seeing that disarmament is, in the last 3 decades, was an issue. now we see the end of disarmament policy. And this is not only a global issue, it's also especially affecting the region of the Eastern Partnership. We see this new arming and the new investment in buying new weapons and new more military solutions than multilateral and diplomatic solutions. And my question would be how we, especially in the Eastern Partnership region, would deal with it. Secondly, we see also that the rule of law, our values of democracy, of strong governance and so on are under threat. And the question which I would ask is, how can we re-strengthen the institutions like also Titus was mentioning before, like the Council of Europe, like the OSCE, especially for the region, because it seems that these institutions are also not in the strongest position in order to defend rule of law, values, democracy, press freedom, and these issues. And my last point would be how we should deal with Russia, especially in the region. Because on the one hand, it's clear we need some, let's say, understanding. The best would be some common policy attitude. But on the other side, also we see a huge distance between the European Union and Russia, and how we can re-establish a better contact without, let's say, having bended knees in front of the Russian politics, neither concerning the human rights issue or also the global policy issues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schiller. And your questions go to which? So you are ready to...
I did not know that I have to choose one. I just simply put it to the distinguished audience.
Panel. Okay, great. So, to collect.
Let's take several questions.
Okay, we'll collect 3 or 4. Yeah, more questions. So we'll go to the second name on the list. It's Mr. Ludomir Zaoralek from Czech Republic. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like also to thank you for convening this meeting. Thank you very much for hospitality here in Bucharest. And also what I very appreciate this topic, Eastern Partnership. It's great to have opportunity to speak about it. And allow me to start, it was said during these speeches that Eastern Partnership is something like test for European Union. I agree, it's a real test. Only what kind of test? And I'm convinced that Eastern Partnership is a test of our soft power. And during these 10 years, many things changed. I would like to commemorate that during these 10 years, our post-war world order was shattered and broke down in Crimea. Annexation of Crimea and what we see in Donbass, it's really fundamental issue. It's really changing the world, and it has to change also our mind. Because now we see that it's not only about values, it's all in Crimea, in Donbass, it's about power. And what was the intention of Ukraine? The intention of Ukraine was to accept our Eastern Partnership and to be more partner, closer partner to EU. And I can tell you, I had many times opportunity to speak also with the representatives of other countries, also in Armenia and others. And also I remember many times was repeated, our opportunity, our possibilities to be part of this offer are limited. It means that we can offer something, but it's a limited possibility to accept this. Concrete example, our deep open door policy in NATO, maybe to Georgia, we are not able to deliver. And that's also something we have to raise, that on the one side, our Eastern Partnership was big offer to cooperation, our attempt to address these countries, and during these 10 years, the lesson which we learned is that we are not able to overcome these limits. We are not able to overcome these barriers and this new Russian behavior. It's fundamental. Somebody said that it's not only about Russia, but I feel very sorry. But maybe in many of these countries, with the exception of Belarus, you have frozen conflicts. These frozen conflicts as concrete instrument how to hammer, how to break, how to stop these countries to participate in our association agreements and cooperation with EU. It's a concrete challenge for us. And to speak about it, our answer has to be comprehensive. It's not only about Eastern Partnership, not only about Eastern partners, it's about the general condition and structure of European Union. I am convinced that one of the main things we have to learn now is that we need more in EU, not only to speak about values. We have to be able also to develop more than only soft power, and that EU role is now also to strengthen capability planning as well as joint military and civilian missions. We have to speak about things, how to strengthen our ability to defend and to be strong as European body. That's maybe something which has to be part of this game.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Zsolt Nemet, Hungary. Mr. Zsolt Nemet.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to wish to the Romanian presidency a success. To you, Mr. Minister Maleșcanu, I hope that by the end of this 6 months, you will sit back and relax and say, we have done a good job. And I would like to greet you colleagues who could come, and I would like to express my sadness that I see quite a few places behind flags which are empty. I think we should maintain the importance and the relevance of our meeting, and I am very glad for those who have come alone. I would like to have two questions. One question relates Mr. Thomas Meyer-Harting. I would like to ask you, Mr. Director, that what is the reason that we don't have this year Eastern Partnership Summit? If we have the 10th anniversary, probably it would be a very good occasion to have a summit. Not having this summit gives me the impression that it might have some relationship to what you have said concerning the lack of consensus concerning the perspective of the Eastern Partnership and the whole policy. Do you see any correlation between these two facts? The other question relates to Ukraine. I would like to ask you, dear colleagues, we all know that on the one hand, our heart is with the Ukrainians, and we have very deep solidarity with them, as it is reasonable to have after this kind of aggression which they have suffered. But at the same time, we experience a very significant level of reduction of basic human and minority rights, reflected in the new educational law, reflecting in the new language law, which is debated in these days in the Ukraine. Is there any so-called normative foreign policy instrument in the hand of the European Union which would eliminate this negative trend and at the same time maintains our commitment and support for the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the Ukraine? And I would like to ask the two ministers, former and present minister, to answer this question if it is possible. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and I think we have collected enough questions, so I turn the floor to our speakers, and let me start the same order. Let me start with Mr. Maleșcanu. Mr. Maleșcanu, if you want to pick up some questions and to...
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions, which are really very important questions. I will start with the last question addressed by His Excellency Zsolt Nemet, and I will be very frank with you. We had an idea to organize a summit on the occasion of the celebration of the 10 years from the partnership. But there were some doubts about the possibility of offering during the summit some messages for the partner Eastern Partnership countries. That's why the decision was adopted to have a high-level meeting of the foreign ministers in Brussels, and this is it. Another issue, which is a very delicate issue from our point of view, is what will be the outcome of this meeting in Brussels? Are we simply taking stock of what happened, or do we really want to look into the future to see what will happen with the Eastern Partnership in the future? But we have to work on it very seriously. There are differences from the point of view of our colleagues concerning these conclusions of the ministerial summit. Now, the second one on Ukraine, you are right. I think practically all our representatives here, all our countries are strongly supporting the idea of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity of Ukraine. I'm convinced that Hungary and Romania, both of us, are very involved in this support for Ukraine, and we are trying to do our best in order to promote this idea. It is obvious also that for any country which has some vision in perspective for getting close to the European Union and to maybe joining the European Union, one of the key issues is full respect for the minorities. And from this point of view, I think we should not put it in a balance one with the other, but we have to be very clear when we ask for full respect of the provisions of international treaties and practices, and also follow very closely what is happening on these issues, law and education, law of the language, and others. We are fully understanding the importance of consolidating the Ukrainian state language, but at the same time, it should not affect the education in their own languages of different minorities. Maybe now is not the best moment. They are in a campaign, in the elections campaign, and sometimes during the elections campaign there are a lot of promises which are not really transformed into realities in the future. But I think we have to look very clearly. I don't know what mechanism at the level of the European Union could be used, but what we can do is to use the mechanisms of the Council of Europe. And here we have a lot of important treaties already adopted and the mechanisms for promoting these ideas. Thank you. Sorry, for Russia. Your question is how to handle it. I think from our point of view, it's very clear and very simple. We have a framework position within the NATO, which speaks about defense and dialogue. It is obvious, if you look at it, it depends to a great extent also of the Russian behavior. From our point of view, we are clearly interested in the defense, in increasing the defense, a tailored forward presence in this region. But secondly, we are also interested in promoting a dialogue with the Russian Federation, which has to be predictable, but also pragmatic, and to respect the rules of international law and offering mutual advantages for all the countries from the European Union and Russia. It is depending to a very great extent by what the Russian Federation is intending to develop in our relations in the future. And from this point of view, the only instruments we have is our protection against hybrid wars. Secondly, the idea of increasing resilience of our countries, and last but not least, the strategic communication, especially during the times of election campaign and others. Strategic communication is really essential. We hope very much there is an opening for it, but it, you know, as they say, you need two for tango, for doing a tango. That's why it depends also very much on what the Russian Federation intends to develop in the future in our relations, in their relations with the European Union. Thank you.
Mr. Harting, please.
Yes, I would first like to answer the question that was asked to me directly by Mr. Nemeth, to which Minister Meliscano has in fact already provided one answer about the issue why we don't have a summit this year. In my understanding, it was at least partly connected with the European calendar, because normally we would have a summit towards the end of the year, and it was not considered particularly helpful to have a summit on such an important subject with an outgoing commission, or perhaps with a commission that has been in office for the very first month of its term in office. The general feeling was, you know, we have approximately 20 billion euro that we have to decide upon in the years up to 27 for the Eastern Partnership. I think it makes sense to do this with a new European administration. And therefore, we were extremely grateful to the Romanian presidency for the initiatives that you have decided on the 10th anniversary, because it helps us doing something constructive and useful while leaving open some of the more important discussions for the year to come. And I think it's likely that we will have a summit under the German presidency. I do not think that it is linked to the issue of whether we can or whether we cannot agree to farther-reaching perspectives, in particular perspectives of membership for some of the Eastern Partnership countries, because frankly speaking, I think it is unlikely that we will have that kind of agreement even in the years to come. I think that the real issue is, and that's the point I make, that we have to make up our mind how far we are willing to go in the field of differentiation. And there I think there is potential even within the limits that we have set ourselves basically in the framework of the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement for those who really want more for more and provide more. This also brings me to the question that Mr. Schieder asked about the rule of law and judiciary. I think that the core reforms that we have to concentrate on are precisely the development of an independent judiciary. This is exactly the area on which the European Union and others have placed the strongest focus, and the other key priority is obviously fighting corruption. And if you follow in particular our discussions with the more advanced Eastern partners, more specifically now also with Ukraine, this is a core concern of our interest. On Russia, first of all, when it comes to the European Union, I have nothing to add to what the Minister has already said about other dimensions. When it comes to the European Union, we have these 5 guiding principles for our relationship with Russia. One of them being that there can only be a substantial change in our relationship once the Minsk agreements are fully implemented. Another of them being precisely again that a strong relationship with our Eastern partners and other neighbors is a corollary to our relationship with Russia. Another one being that we are willing to engage in selective engagement with Russia in areas where this is in the shared interest. I think this goes without saying, and people-to-people contacts are another field of cooperation. But let me now say, and I want to repeat what I said earlier on, the Eastern Partnership as such helps to strengthen the resilience of our Eastern partners, and these Eastern partners face considerable challenges because of the conflicts they are involved in, 5 out of the 6 of them, and I do think that what the European Union has been able to do, and I agree with Mr. Zaoralek that it's basically a challenge for what we can do as a soft power, what the European Union is able to do to strengthen the societal structures of these countries is an essential contribution to the complicated situation and challenging situation they're facing. But let me repeat again, the Eastern Partnership as such is not an instrument of conflict resolution, and it is not directed against anyone. It is also not directed against Russia. What I believe we should do is find solutions where the countries can define their own relationship with us while having reasonable relations with their other neighbors. And we seem to be more successful in doing this in a case like Armenia, with a country that, for reasons that we know, decided to place the emphasis of its relationship with Russia, and we have been able, in a certain sense, to be honest, it was Russia that placed Armenia before a binary choice, because convincing the country to join the Eurasian Economic Union, which is a customs union, placed Armenia in a situation where it could no longer have a preferential trade agreement with us. Whereas our Eastern partners, even the most advanced Eastern partners, have a free trade arrangement with us, which is potentially compatible with free trade agreements with others. So if somebody places countries in the Eastern Partnership before binary choices, it is not the European Union. And even so, in the case of Armenia, we've been able to find a formula which has been made compatible with Armenia's obligations in the Eurasian Economic Union. They have this new and comprehensive agreement with us, which is an important step forward. And I'm basically waiting for the moment where we achieve the same with countries that place the key emphasis on their relationship with us. Say Ukraine, for instance. Why would it not be possible for Ukraine to have its deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with us, and for Russia to be able to find an arrangement with Ukraine that is compatible with their agreements with us, just as in the same way that our agreements are compatible with theirs. And finally, although the question was not addressed to me directly on the issue of minority rights, I think that everybody understands, on the one hand, the specific challenges that countries in the Eastern Partnership are facing when it comes to state building and strengthening their national identity. On the other hand, it is also clear that respecting obligations in the framework of the Council of Europe is key, and the Venice Commission has expressed itself very clearly also with regard to the education law and the language law in Ukraine. And let me say that the European Union member states were able to agree on language in joint documents with Ukraine that underlined these obligations. And in a certain sense, if I may put it in these terms, we were more successful than NATO in this over a long period of time, because we had a number of important events with Ukraine where both Ukraine and the European Union signed up to this language, which makes clear the need to respect obligations and recommendations in particular also of the Venice Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coneziano, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll try to combine questions that were raised by Andrea Schieder and by Lubomir Zaoralek. First of all, on Eastern Partnership and challenges, rule of law, how to use our instruments, and so on. I do remember the fact that Romania signed the association agreement on 1st of February 1993. It was ratified until we finished the process of ratification in the member states on 1st of February 1995. And we acceded to EU on 1st of January 2007. So it took 14, 15 years since the moment of the signature of the association agreement to accede to EU. It was a long process of reforms, very painful, sometimes very costly, also in political terms. But we knew from 1st of February 1993 that the final destination will be accession to EU, because the association agreement included a clause saying candidature and membership, which is a fundamental difference with the association agreements that were signed by the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. What I try to say is that when someone, and you have a deal, you have an agreement, and someone is asking based on the agreement, you should do the following things. And this might be important transformations, radical reforms, painful and costly. At least you should know why you do this until the end of the process. What is the final target? And honestly, at least is my opinion, these association agreements which offered something important, supplementary to what was the former neighborhood policy, we have already 10 years, and I hope it will still be on the table, the engagement of these countries. After 10 years, working, sometimes making mistakes and so on, is it enough to determine the dynamic for finalizing these reforms? It's a question of putting in balance what is the final destination. It might be very stimulative, and you can determine that partner to do those things. Otherwise, you will see, because it's also about power in a country, it's also about resources, it's also about facing challenges, security challenges from Russia. Not all the time the means used by a power in those countries which are associated are extremely orthodox. And we should understand properly what are the challenges, all in all. So what I'm saying, when discussing about the rule of law and the Council of Europe instruments and the European Union instruments, of course, these are the requirements. By the way, we have a problem right now because we have two distinct, nevertheless, systems. There is a discussion of a new instrument mechanism of the European Union in terms of democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights. When in the Council of Europe since 1949 we have exactly the three main topics and the instruments, how we should combine to make the synergy and not to generate duplication systems which might be in competition. This will have a negative impact on our partners. They will work with whom, according to what rules, and so on. They are not fundamentally different rules, of course, but we should pay attention how we harmonize our work. So rule of law, democracy, this is essential, but what is the last goal, final goal, for those who are committed to make the efforts and to pay the price? And this is about a political decision. And it's also about political will. Because when launching interesting intellectually new ideas, for instance, less for less, in my opinion, it's hiding the lack of political will to engage more in a much more decisive way our partners. Very briefly on...
Please
yes,
try to...
Yes, very briefly on Ukraine, Jean Lemaitre raised the question. It's important, it's part of the criteria, protection of national minorities, and both of us, we launched the procedure in the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly, with the report, the resolution we have adopted, launching the procedure to the Venice Commission, recommendations, and then what? No follow-up. It's also on our part, our problem. We know there are presidential elections, we didn't put it too much pressure not to disturb the climate, but it's also on our side to use in a democratic, transparent way our criteria, our mechanisms. And we should follow what we said. Supporting all the time Ukraine, because when having this Ukraine, and it's my final comment, is the biggest neighbor of Romania. We have 640 kilometers, is not so much the border, common border, but it's the biggest neighbor. Definitely we have the interest to see the continuation of the European project for Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because of our time limits, we have to stop here, and I'm very sorry for those who not been able to ask questions, but we still have sessions, and the topics are somehow overlap in one way or another. So I would like to thank to our speakers and for their very rich contributions, and we would like to and at the end, I shall pass the floor to Mr. Dumitrescu for a very brief conclusion and some technical remarks.
No, a lot of remarks. Because I'm the guardian of the program. This is my job. Thank you very much, first of all, Mr. Meleshcanu, Mr. Hardy, Mr. Kodvalcian, and Professor Dungaciu for a very interesting section and debate.